All right, Mark, we are live.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 5 of the Capitalist Corner. I am your host, Mark Pellegrino, chairman of the Capitalist Party, with my esteemed co-host. I don't want to leave out
Very
that part.
esteemed, yes, very esteemed.
Very esteemed co-host, Michael Liebowitz, who also has his own show, The Rational Egoist, where where he talks about all things objectivists. He integrates objectivist morality into pretty much every subject you talk about. It's a great show to watch. It's very informative. You should check it out. He debates some great people. He has some really smart folks on, and usually does some intellectual jujitsu on them. So if you're into that kind of thing, as I am, at least the physical part of it, you'll find his show extremely fascinating. So today we're going to be dealing. Did you want to say something
I
before?
do. I want to tell you something that I
Okay.
found funny. I'm watching this show Cobra Kai. I haven't watched. I'm only in the first. I just got done with the first season, so don't spoil it. But it's so funny to me because I've known people, that take karate, you take jujitsu. This stuff takes years to master. These kids, they take like 2 weeks of karate lessons and they're at school whipping like five dudes at once. And I'm just
Yeah.
like, oh my God. But I love it because it's nostalgic for me. It brings me back to the 80s. And I think that's kind of the point of the show. But
Uh,
karate's not that easy to learn.
no, it isn't. It takes a long look. Unfortunately, in America, they give you a black belt in Taekwondo in 2 years. That's the general amount of time it takes. When when I started Taekwondo, they jumped me right to green belt because I'd been doing Muay Thai for 3 or 4 years. So I remember being taught by a two-stripe red belt a particular technique. And I said, I'm sorry, sir, that's not going to work. Now, two-stripe red belt is right below black. You have to remember. So this guy had been in it for about a year and a half. I'd been doing Taekwondo for 6 months and was only at the advanced right below him because of my Muay Thai experience. And he said, I'm telling you, it's going to work. I'm saying, I'm telling you, it's not. I mean, I was a bouncer in a club. I did Aikijitsu for years. This is not going to work. I said, you can try it on me and I'll throw you. And this is in front of class, mind you. This is a very politically incorrect thing to do as a lower ranker to question the higher ranker who's teaching a technique. He said, okay, sure, because he was very confident, a little arrogant, if you don't mind my saying. And then he tried to do the technique on me, and I threw him. And so from that time on, when I began to teach, when I became a red belt and then a one stripe and two stripe red belt and then advanced even further, I used to teach the technique that they would teach in class so that you could pass the exam because they gave formal examinations then. And then I would teach the way you should do it in the street to actually make it work. So I would teach two ways of doing a technique every time I taught a class. 2 years to get a black belt, you can't defend yourself unless you're training every day privately or you're working out with like Olympic Taekwondo people. You are not going to be able to defend yourself with that. 10 years, that's the average it takes to get a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And you've been crushed every day of your life going into that class. You've earned that black belt with blood, sweat, tears. I've had black eyes. I did the show with a black eye. I went up down south and
Well, you did a show with a black guy.
black eye.
Oh, oh, okay.
And listen to you. Where's your mind at, friend? So anyway, look, the first article I want to deal with today is from the Epic Times, and it deals with a lot of the firings that happened of the National Security Council staffers. Now, of course, it's the prerogative of the executive to fire people if he so choose. But and some of these firings, of course, are controversial and being taken up by the courts, as they should be. The courts are doing their due diligence. They are checking and balancing the power of the executive. But what most disturbed me about this article in the Epic Times is it tends to be a conservative rag. So it's going to come down on the side of the typical conservative message, whatever that happens to be right now. And right now, the typical conservative messaging is Trump is right. Trump is king. Trump is the monarch. Whatever Trump wants, Trump gets. What disturbed me particularly about his reasoning for the firing were two out of his three reasons. And I suspect the two out of the three are actually higher than the second reason. He said this: we always let people go that we don't like. Okay, number one, frightening. That's his first reason. They let people go that they don't like. This to me, bespeaks of a particular kind of culture that is germinating in the White House, a culture of yes men, a culture of people who will do the king's bidding, a culture of people who will not question him, a culture of sycophants who pretend to praise him, regardless of what they feel, because praise is what makes the master happy. Not the truth, but praise. Now, that's a very scary thing, and that's his first reason. His second reason is, or people that we don't think do the job. Now, of course, that is a legitimate reason for firing somebody. Of course, he says that we don't think, the we meaning the royal we, he doesn't think does the job. Now, of course, I question the legitimacy of Trump's capacity to be able to judge by any standard whatsoever, particularly whether somebody in a national security position can do their job or not. But here's the most disturbing thing. Or people that may have loyalties to somebody else, not to some other country, not to some other ideology, not a foreign agent, but to someone other than Donald Trump. Now, these are disturbing reasons to fire people. Look, there was a great book written about Abraham Lincoln, who called, what was it called? Confederacy of Rivals, I think may be the title. I may be getting the title wrong. But what Lincoln did was something not only politically astute, but brilliant. He made all of his political enemies and all of his political rivals part of his cabinet. Now, here's a man who, now the reason he did that could have been the practical reason of, I want you keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer so that you know what your enemies are doing. But the effect was to have a group of people who were sort of inherently and constitutionally against everything that Lincoln stood for, so that he could have a sounding board and always in opposition to compare and contrast his own set of concepts with. Now, that's the way you learn. That's the way you grow. And it bespeaks an extremely secure human being, secure in his own intelligence, secure in his own judgment. And of course, famously, he won over the majority of those cabinet members who went from being his rivals and his enemies to deeply respecting his political acumen. Now, I think one should surround himself with a diversity of opinion and people who disagree, because once you gain a certain amount of celebrity and fame, particularly the amount of celebrity and fame that is associated with the presidency of the United States, fewer and fewer people are going to tell you the truth. Fewer and fewer people are going to say no to you because of the incredible power you wield in their eyes. And it is imperative that you have gut checks and life checks in the form of opposition right there in front of you who are going to tell you exactly what they think without fear, because that's how you grow as a man. That's how your in integrity, honesty, and intelligence will grow, by constantly doing battle with opposition and putting it under stress. So that disturbed me. But then there was something that Laura Loomer said that disturbed me even more than that, if you can imagine. Now, some of you may know,
disturbs me. Period.
Laura Loomer is a very disturbing human being. So it's not surprising that she says something disturbing. But I want to throw this by you, Michael, because it's super scary. And I want to see if you're vibing in the same way that I am. So the president denies reports alleging that right-wing activist Laura Loomer had influenced the decision. Anonymous media reports had alleged that Loomer recommended the firings to Trump in a meeting the previous day. In a post on social media platform X, Loomer said she won't provide any details about her April 2nd meeting with Trump, quote, out of respect for the president, the real Donald Trump, and the privacy of the Oval Office. Okay, that's a disturbing concept to me. I'm going to decline on divulging any details about my Oval Office meeting with President Trump. Look, the privacy of the Oval Office, unless it is a matter of true national security, there is no such thing as the privacy of a public office. The president has a fiduciary responsibility to the citizens of the United States. That means that he owes the citizens of the United States complete transparency. The fact that the governments haven't been, the previous administrations haven't been transparent, is what's led to this widespread nonsense. There are a variety of conspiracy theories that are running around in a mass neurosis respecting the government because they have not been transparent. Now, this just shows what our founders understood all along when they were suspicious about the growing parties. When the Federalist and Anti-Federalist parties started growing, the founders were suspicious of partisanship because they understood that the people would, the men in the parties would become partisans. They would become party men, and their interests would be in defending and insulating the party from harm, as opposed to performing the fiduciary responsibility to the people of the United States of America and protecting the Constitution. Now, what do you think about this concept of the privacy of the Oval Office?
Okay, well, first, I think the book you were talking about is called Team of Rivals by
That's
Doris Kearns Goodwin, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, Team of Rivals.
So Laura Loomer, she was a 9/11 conspiracy theorist. The government did it, that sort of thing. Trump took her to the 9/11 memorial, knowing she had been, well, I don't know, maybe he didn't know, but he should know that she had been a 9/11 conspiracy theorist. She drones on and on and on and on Twitter or X about how loyalty to Trump is important, how she's so loyal to him, that sort of thing. So the sycophancy on her part is just gross. That's the first thing. Secondly, I don't doubt for a second that she told him to fire these people. I don't doubt it at all. So that said, but by the way, and she also said that I see that there's still leaks or some such thing in the within the administration. There's still people leaking, so there's that. But you're right. You're absolutely right that this is not a matter for privacy. Privacy would be a national security issue. A civilian in the Oval Office who happens to be a monumental ass kisser and a nut, who is reported to have advised the president and he listens, that is not a matter of national security. That should not be a matter for privacy. That is something that people deserve to know. It is, after all, the people's house, right?
And given the fact that we've just set up a profile of Donald Trump with these two statements from him and from Laura Loomer, we have to assume, and I think assume rightly, that the reason he's taking his advice has nothing to do with her epistemological capacity, her efficacy as a politician, her sharp judgment, but the fact that she's loyal to him and likes him.
Yes, that's all he's after.
That's it.
And, he has this, well, it's like a dual reputation, I guess. Amongst his followers, he's this uber confident, tough guy, right? But he's just an insecure twit. Like, I can't express it enough. I've been around tough guys in my life. He's not one of them. I've been around confident people. He's not one of them. He's anyone who ever wants to look up the narcissistic paradox, it describes Trump to a T. Someone who cracks the second that their fragile ego is challenged. Like Jim Valiant says here, he's super insecure. And so, yes, he looks for people that are loyal, and he's filled his administration with these people. And he goes on. I mean, that article from the Epic Times, he praises Laura Loomer. While he denies her influence in this instance, he says she's great. She's been a member of the party for a long time. She gives great advice. Why are you taking advice from this woman? And I think you gave us the answer. It's simply because she satisfies his ego needs, his need for everybody to be loyal to him.
That's a frightening characteristic for the leader of the free world to have. And a characteristic, I might add, that is apropos of dictators all over the world, not presidents of the United States. Lincoln had the right idea. Surround yourself by people who disagree with you. And in the debate that you have, you will either persuade them or they will persuade you. But somewhere in that debate, that therein lies the security of our republic, is the fact that open information, transparency enables us to make choices that are right for us. And this is what I see increasingly being shut down, which leads me to a segue about the Reason report on the eroding support for free speech in America. But you don't want to go there yet.
I do. I just want to. And I've said this before. I'll say it again, and I'm going to say it as much as I can. Donald Trump is not a capitalist. The policies he's putting forward are not capitalist policies. The economy will suffer because of the policies he's putting forward. And if those of us who are advocates of capitalism stay silent, when the economy fails, they're going to come out in droves and say this is a direct result of capitalism. This is a direct result of deregulation that he's not actually doing. We need to make the case over and over and over again that this is not capitalism, so that when the economy does fail, we can say, when they come out and say this is capitalism, no, it's not. And it's not new that we're saying this. We've been saying it all along.
Yeah,
so I think it's vital.
I agree with you. And I've already done a preemptive strike on Twitter. I encourage the capitalist digital army to do the same as often as possible. There's like 125 of you. A small number does not mean we are small in power. You can go out there and you can demonstrate to people why tariffs are not a free market phenomenon, why tariffs are not capitalism, why economic protectionism and even nationalism are not aspects of capitalism, so that they see that what's contributing to our economic stifling and to our economic failure, to the higher cost of living that's going to happen as a result of these tariffs, which is amazing that a guy, even with the myopathy of Trump, can't see that, putting tariffs on steel is not going to have massive effects across multiple industries, and a viral effect, in fact, that's going to raise the cost of living for all of us, and it's not going to be temporary. And the thing, the conservative press is doing sort of what the left-wing press did for Biden. They're circling the wagons around Trump, and they're finding excuses as to why this reciprocal tariff concept is working, by pointing out certain countries that have decided to be leveraged into, like Israel dropping 100% tariffs against the United States, going to zero, which is great. That's actual free trade, and other countries who have made deals to bring manufacturing back into the United States to avoid the tariffs. Manufacturing that will probably take a number of years to get online, and then employ American workers at a higher cost than the workers that were being employed in other states, which will still result in a higher cost of living for all of us, even though a small portion of the population benefits from them. That's always the case with tariffs, folks. Tariffs will benefit a small portion of the population that is being protected, and perhaps they're chosen as the protected class because they have certain political connections that you and I don't. But you and I will suffer from those tariffs. There's no question about it. Tariffs are not capitalistic. A capitalist would lower international tariffs to zero. I just watched something with Milton Friedman, who said the very same thing. Tariffs, they hurt the other guy, but they also hurt us. And when a tariff war happens, everybody's getting hurt. There's no real benefit from raising the cost of living for the average American. Milton Friedman himself, Nobel Prize laureate, great economist in his own right, said lower tariffs to zero. It doesn't matter what the other guys are doing. It doesn't matter. Guys, it doesn't matter that you have a trade deficit with your grocery store. You are better off. You have a trade deficit with Apple. You have a trade deficit with your furniture store. You are better off. It's okay. It's okay to trade that way. The countries that decide to use onerous tariffs to protect their own domestic industries are only hurting themselves. And no, China's not dumping steel into the United States because they can do it cheaper than us. They are actually doing us a favor. And it's okay. It's okay. It's good for us. That means that we can build, we can construct things, and any area where steel is used will become much cheaper. The supply line will become much more affordable and accessible. And that product produced at the end of the line will be much more affordable to you. And that's a good thing, right? Right? Having a higher standard of living is a good thing. We all want to shoot for that.
Should be, yeah.
I think so.
All right. So you were before I got you off on a tangent, you were getting ready to pivot to the free speech story.
I was, but maybe you can pivot a little bit more into this. You can take this one from me.
Oh no, I wasn't prepared to pivot. Okay,
Oh, okay.
no, I'll
I'll pivot.
pivot. I'll do the pivot. I'm just a
Okay.
little taken aback. We've got some people in the chat here. They've been talking about what a handsome guy you are, and you're very robust for your age, that kind of thing.
For
And
my
I'm just
age.
saying that I'm not getting any compliments like that. And it's like we're at LibertyCon all over again. It's just this is the way it goes. No, but seriously, yeah, this free peach store, the free peach. I wish they were giving out free peaches. The price of peaches are probably going to go up too. This free speech story in Reason Magazine, according to a recent survey, favorable attitudes toward free speech are on the decline. And America is actually ninth on this list of attitudes favorable to free speech. And they say that that's good, but we're not on a good trajectory. And like things criticizing the flag, criticizing the government, saying things negatively about minorities. And the one that kind of shocked me is being people are down. They don't like free speech on praising homosexual relationships. So it's really people are tired of people saying what they want. I don't know why that's happening. I just know that it is, and I find it very disturbing. Being able to say what one wants, even if others are offended by it, is vital. We have the First Amendment not to protect the speech that everybody wants to hear. The point is, there's going to be speech that others don't want to hear.
That's correct. The Bill of Rights are there to protect the minority. Okay, that for us, the smallest minority in the world is the individual. They're also there to protect the unpopular because the founders knew how easy it was for mobs to gather and scapegoat particular individuals or unpopular groups of individuals and to gain political power and to do bad things to those people. So the free speech, it's good for us epistemologically because we need all the information we can. It's good for our moral agency because we need all the information that we can get in order to make choices. And it's good for liberty because the unpopular gets protected from force, and that's a good. And this is a very scary direction that we're heading in for a number of reasons. One of the most tangible to me is comes from Leonard Peikoff, because Peikoff has been asked over and over again, well, we're sliding into tyranny. So when exactly is it appropriate for Americans to rebel against the tyranny? Now, certainly the American government has gone from, 3% GDP to 150% of our GDP. They've gone to controlling very few aspects of our lives, literally minuscule and microscopic, to controlling every aspect of our life. We are certainly sliding into. We've certainly slid into a state control, but we haven't slid into tyranny completely ideologically yet. But we're heading in that direction. Trump is heading us in that direction. The Democrats have been heading us in that direction for a while. So when is the right time to rebel? And Peikoff said, when there's no more free speech. It's that because, of course, when you have no platform over which to debate these ideas and persuade others, you only have one alternative: force, right? There's either persuasion or force. And we are quickly reaching that point when the majority of people in a country are beginning to see free speech as an anathema to the American system of government. It's not, folks. It is fundamental to a functioning republic. It's fundamental to your mind. It's fundamental to a proper government. You want the government restrained. The government has no say in what you say, provided you are not libeling another or inciting violence against another. That's it. Force, fraud are the only things the government has a say about. Anything else, whether you like it or not, should be in the public sector. And it's for you to judge. You are your own censor, not the government. The government has no place in that. So this is a very troubling development, and may mean that we're headed towards a time when actual rebellion has to happen. But unfortunately, we lack what the founders had. which was a general set of principles accepted by a culture. We have a relatively nihilistic culture now that's searching for a moral compass it can't find, and
Yeah.
we're trying to provide that here, but we're only two guys.
I personally think that as long as we have the right to vote, the idea of rebellion, I think, is silly at this point, because if we had enough people willing to rebel, we'd have enough people willing to vote the bastards out. So I always find that to be a premature discussion. So we've got some questions in the chat here, and these are going to be controversial, Mark, and you and I might disagree on these things, which is fine. I mean, we're adults. Adults disagree. So Race Jacobson says, I'm a tad skeptical about free speech stuff from Reason Magazine lately because they think the Muhammad Khalil debacle is a free speech issue, which is absurd. And Kathy Cassio, I don't know if that's what she's referring to. She says people confuse free speech with disruptive protest. Disrupting people's lives is not free speech. So the first thing, Mark, can you tell us a little bit about this Muhammad Khalil debacle that Race is referring to, and we can see where it lies within the spectrum of free speech?
Yeah, you may know a little bit more about it than I do, so I'll just give a thumbnail sketch of what I know. From what I know, he was a graduate of Columbia University who was the head of a pro-Palestinian organization on campus, and he wound up organizing protests. Now, according to some news outlets, some of these protests became violent and they vandalized property. I don't know if he was directly involved in that or not. That's certainly a question that needs to be answered through due process of law, which I don't know that he's gone through yet. He served as a negotiator, I think, for the pro-Palestinian side with respect to the administration's response to the protests. Now, I think campuses are not places for protests, but of course, I think, just like I think the streets are not places for protests, but a private university, of course, can make up its own rules with respect to that, and those are the rules that one follows. The fact is complicated, of course, by the unfortunate fact that Columbia University takes millions and millions and millions of dollars in grants from the federal government, which makes it more public space. And then, of course, we have the tragedy of the commons now occurring. So it's very difficult to suss out where rights end and where they begin in a scenario like that. Now, if he's just been a negotiator, a student negotiator, an organizer, I can find the man detestable. I can find everything he believes in disgusting and despicable. Should he be somewhere is he in Louisiana, locked away in a jail cell indefinitely with no trial? I don't think so. I don't think that's correct. Should campuses be places of protest? I don't think they should be places of protest. But if they're private institutions that receive no federal funding, then there should be no question about what they do because they should be governing themselves. Now, is that a surprising response to you with respect to Muhammad?
A little bit. A little bit. I thought you would be a little bit more in favor of his detainment. So kudos to you for surprising me and for being close to the correct opinion, which is, of course, mine. So,
but where did we differ? Since I'm only close.
Well, we didn't. We actually didn't. I don't know that we actually do differ, Mark. Okay. But the problem here is, first, that you have to parse this thing out, right? First, the problem is Columbia is getting federal funds. So as pro-capitalists, I think the first argument we should be making is they shouldn't be getting federal funding, right?
Correct.
They shouldn't be getting funding from government. That's the first thing. Then another portion of this is the immigration piece, that this guy's a legal green card holder and he's here legally. But on what basis would he even be kept out of the country to begin with? If you study the U.S. Constitution, we discussed this before, the federal government has no authority over immigration. So they should have no say about this guy coming in the country unless he is from a country with which we are at war, or perhaps an organization with which we are at war. Since we have no declared war, since by the Constitution only Congress can declare war, we haven't actually been at war since World War II. So that's a couple things. Then the question becomes about, does he belong to this organization? He does. And I'm seeing many conflicting reports about this organization, right? I've heard that they're basically a leg of Hamas. I've seen that, no, that's not true. When that type of stuff happens, I'm always going to go on the side of freedom, right? Always, when I'm uncertain. This guy has not been charged with anything, zero crimes. He's not been charged, but he's being detained. Last I heard, they were trying to say, well, he lied on his green card application. Okay, that's not why you detained him. Now you're just looking for an excuse to get him out because you don't approve of other behaviors that he's engaged in. As far as the protests on campus, and this goes, I think, to Kathy's perspective, it depends what you mean by disruptive, right? Are students on campus saying things, yelling, protesting? I have no issue with that. If they're preventing, like you brought up the case of a street, if people are in the street protesting, they're now blocking traffic. In essence, they're initiating force against other people. They're not simply just out there putting their viewpoint. They're now preventing other people from doing what they need to do. If they're on campus and they're yelling and screaming and saying things that people don't want to hear as they walk from class to class, well, I say that's tough. But if they're standing in the way and preventing people from going, that's a different story. But an interesting thing is, I once interviewed what was his name, Harvey Silverglate, the founder of FIRE, the free speech, individual rights, something. I don't remember what it was called, something along those lines. But he said the fact that the government is funding them actually increases the right of the government to make sure there's freedom of speech on those campuses. Because if it's a private institution, then the private institution can govern however they want. But given that the government is funding them, similar with education, that you can't have education in schools because they're government funded, which means that the establishment clause of the First Amendment comes into play. Similarly, the no restrictions on free speech would come into play because it's a public place. That was his argument.
I disagree fundamentally with that.
Well, ultimately, I'm not he's a constitutional expert. I'm not. But ultimately, I will always come down on the side of freedom when I'm not certain. And given that there's disparate reports about who this guy belongs to, what they do, what he did, given that he hasn't been charged, given that they're not even claiming, as far as I know, that he committed a crime, I'm going to side with him regardless of whether I like what he has to say. Ultimately, the United States of America is not at war with Hamas. We're just not at war with them. We can hate them. We can say they're terrorist groups. But if people in this country aren't free to say they support them, then we just don't have free speech. As detestable as it may be, as much as I may not like it, there's a lot of things people say that I don't like. We should not be locking them up, especially not without due process, which is what they've done in this case. Now, there might be facts that I don't know and I'm unaware of. I haven't meticulously studied it. So if other things come out, I would happily change my view on the subject.
I think he worked for UNRWA, and there's already deep evidence that UNRWA was complicit in the attacks on October 7th, and that they play a part in
for UNRWA.
Yeah.
In Palestine, he worked for them?
In Gaza. No, I think he was a translator, and I think he might have been some kind of translator or had a diplomatic role in Lebanon. But he was a proxy for UNRWA. Now, all of this stuff that I know are allegations at this point. They've not been proven, and they need to be proven in a court of law. And as much as I detest this person's perspective and detest what he stands for, he shouldn't be rotting away in a prison cell until they trump up a number of charges with which to deport him. They need to actually prove their case or let him go. I
don't think you mean they should be trumping up charges.
You know what I mean. It was a play. It was a deliberate play on words. Now, I guess I don't. I disagree with this guy's concept that federal funding makes the government have to enforce free speech. Part of free speech and part of liberty is the ability to do what you think and make your own rules on your own property, and that means excluding speech in a private enterprise, and that's perfectly fine. If I own a radio station and I only want to bring capitalists on, I don't want to bring communists on or anarchists.
Oh, I agree with that. But what if your radio station is petitioning and receiving federal funding?
Right. In that case, and look, the money has the power, and the money has the power to dictate terms. In which case, then they can come in and violate my free speech rights, which is my capacity to discriminate some ideas from other ideas. That should be an open capacity for every free American. Now, with respect to what was going on campus, these people weren't just stopping at yelling.
No, I
nasty
know
things.
they weren't. But what was he doing? That's what I'm
Yeah,
wondering.
correct. But I just want to make it clear for anybody watching that we
Yeah.
understand the protesters were intimidating Jewish
Yes.
students. They were preventing them from going to class.
In some cases, right, Mark? I don't know. I don't know enough about it. It wasn't in all cases. All the protesters were doing this, right?
There were days when they completely blocked off the classes to Jewish students.
Okay,
And
so those people that did that,
they would certainly surround them and intimidate them, physically intimidate them. I mean, somebody getting within your space, a group of people getting within your space and screaming at you and pointing fingers at you, so you don't know if the next moment is going to bring about violence. That's certainly a disgusting
Sure.
and ugly thing, and all of those people, frankly, should be expelled. They should have their.
I'm with you on that. If
They
you
should-
are physically preventing people from going to class,
You
that's a
should be
different,
expelled.
different
You should be
scenario
expelled.
altogether.
Whatever ever scholarships you have should be terminated. That to me would be a just institution. But I think we look. Liberty is a dangerous thing, folks. It means that you're sometimes not going to get what you want, or you're sometimes going to hear things that really irritate you and bother you. That's the contrary from being a bad thing. It's a good thing. It challenges you. It challenges you to check your premises, and it keeps you a healthy, active-minded human being. And you don't want to lose that. And remember, the free speech is supposed to protect unpopular positions. Like ours, for example, liberty is an unpopular position today. People are more interested in the safety that they think government can provide them over the unknowns that occur with liberty. There's no limit to how high you can go in a free country. But people don't necessarily want to take the chance of discovering that. They'd rather have something that they think is a sure bet. Of course, it isn't. But that's what makes liberty, I think, a partially unpopular position. Yeah.
So just to button this up, in my view, the proper sort of method of argumentation here would be first to argue against government funding of universities.
Exactly.
Second to argue against government involvement, if the federal government's involved in immigration, unless we're at war with a country. And third, defend the rights of private institutions and private people. And if this guy ultimately used force, it can be shown he used force or conspired to use force or aided somebody in using force, then I'm all for charging him. But given that they haven't charged them, we ought not be detaining people without charging them with something, without due process. That is very, it's not only is it anti-capitalism, but I mean, it's anti-American.
It's anti-American. It's a terrible precedent to set, and it will be used by whatever party is in power to abuse the minority in their eyes. What was the other thing you said? There was another thing we had that you said we would have various opinions on. There was Muhammad, and then there was something else.
No, they were tied together. It was the what's disruptions, and Kathy actually she clarified. She's talking about preventing people from freedom of movement. Example:
Yes.
preventing Jewish students from going to class.
Exactly.
So I don't disagree with that. Okay, so the next topic, Mark, it's related to this topic of free speech. Several months ago, Congress passed a law banning TikTok, and then Donald Trump came forward and gave them, I think, 75 days to sell off the company to someone else because they wanted to separate it from the Chinese government. Now they're at the point where they have to sell. And I saw that, well, maybe the Donald's going to allow them to give them a little bit more time. There's a lot of issues here, and it's a complex issue. So they say, well, someone asked, what are our thoughts on Alex Jones? To copy the great Howard Rourke, I don't think of Alex Jones.
Yes.
So we got this situation, right, where there's claims that the Chinese government is using TikTok to spy on America. So that's the argument to get rid of it. There's also arguments that they're manipulating children. They're doing this, they're doing that. Again, my default position is freedom, that people have the right to make their own choices. If people want to put their data at risk by dealing with TikTok, as I do, then they should have the right to do so. Unless it can just absolutely be demonstrated that this is a dangerous to national security, which I don't believe they've done, then I might switch it. Then I'm open to arguments. But in the absence of that, I'm for it. I'm for TikTok. I don't think Congress should have passed the law. I also don't think the president should have the executive power to overturn a congressional law just because he doesn't like it. But ultimately, I don't like it. I think that we need to be free to do what we want to do. And again, there's dangers in it. Yes, there's the danger that the Chinese are spying on us. Yes, there's the danger that young kids are going to get their hands on TikTok and learn bad things or do bad things and have influence. I don't disagree with any of that. But freedom is an inherently risky prospect. And if you're talking about depriving people of the freedom to engage with a company that they want to engage with, you need more than, but the Chinese are spying on us. That's my view on the subject anyway.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I mean, technology advances for the good and the bad alike, and the bad are going to use the technology to advance their interests, just like the good are going to use the technology to advance their interests. I think it's fairly common knowledge, at least if you read enough of the Epoch Times, which I said has dissident Chinese as their founders, that every company that the Chinese puts out on the market has to go through the CCP. Not only does it have to go through the CCP, but it is connected to the military-industrial complex. Now, if this is a proven fact, then there could be a case to not let government workers or people in sensitive positions in government who hold national security interests to be engaged in TikTok or in any other types of social media where that information could be breached. But for the average citizen, I mean, I've been watching on TV dozens of advertisements of businesses that would have gone under during COVID had it not been for TikTok, and dozens of businesses that began to thrive simply because they could advertise on TikTok. They were unknown, working out of their garages before. Now they're hiring 60, 70, 80, 100 people. They have a corporation that's growing and thriving because of TikTok. I mean, these innovations enable people like you and me to be seen by masses of people. And yeah, the left and leftist orientation sort of has they have a kind of monopolistic control over these mediums at the moment, but it's not a monopoly of law. It's just simply the fact that more of them gravitate towards these interesting mediums. And it's a matter of time before that shifts and changes if the spaces are allowed to be free. I have a tremendous amount of faith and reason, and I can't help but share Rand's view of the American people as an essentially rational people. As crazy and nihilistic as the right wants us to think the world is right now, it's a lot better than it was 75 or 100 years ago. It's a lot less violent. Even though there's a strong nihilistic stream going through America right now, there's also a strong stream that's yearning for rational argumentation, and a party like the American Capitalist Party that has rational solutions to problems and freedom-oriented solutions to problems. and principled solutions to problems. So, and mediums like this, like the medium we're using now, and like TikTok, can enable us to spread that message even further. And that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. It's a good thing.
There's so much to this, Mark, is that, first of all, what about the domestic social media companies, as Alan Thomas points out? So it's okay for the U.S. government to petition them to spy on us? The U.S. government, what do they want? Their monopoly on spying on us? And I mean, we're using cell phones, messaging apps, all kinds of things. So if we're going to get into the argument, well, it's a danger because a foreign entity can use this information against us, I'm afraid we've crossed the Rubicon on that, right? And we're just going to be restricting our own liberty and opening ourselves up to the American government simply making claims about what other countries are doing or what entities are doing. And we need to restrict your freedom here for your own good. It's for your own good. We can't tell you why. Like Laura Loomer says, the Oval Office needs to have its privacy. We can't know why they're doing these things, but they can. I'm just in favor of freedom. Like I said, I can think of, it's like vaccine mandates. Generally, I'm very opposed to them. Can somebody give me a hypothetical situation that I would say, well, that's a serious case, I might allow it? Sure. But in the real world in which we live, I've yet to see such a case, and I'm not going to be for it unless I'm very, very much convinced.
I don't know that there would ever be a case for appropriate mandating of vaccines.
Somebody gave me an argument one time, and I don't remember exactly what it was.
There can be a case for mandatory for sequestering people.
Maybe that's what it was. Maybe it wasn't vaccines. I'm sorry. No, you're right. It was sequestered. Scratch that. There's no circumstances I'm for a vaccine. It was sequestering. That's what it was. And I said I'm against sequestering. I don't like it. But you could hypothetically come up with a situation where I'd say, oh, okay, I'd do it there.
Indeed, somebody's walking around with the Ebola virus. They need to be quarantined, and part of the government's responsibility is to protect the safety of the American people.
Sure, and
force, fraud, communicable diseases, that's justifiable, but they can't quarantine everyone like they did with COVID. That's simply ridiculous. They have to quarantine the sick. That's the way it's gone in the past. That's the way it should go now. You don't quarantine the healthy in the anticipation that they may get sick in the future.
Mark, you said something a while ago that I have to bring to your attention, the irony of the statement. You said, I have faith in reason.
I know. That was great. I knew it was ironic as I said it, but Rand had a tremendous amount of faith in the American people. She felt that there was, and what I find interesting is that the elite in Washington have zero respect for the American people. Really, when it comes down for it, they have contempt for the American people. But somehow, given the great diversity of thinking and not thinking out there in the American patois, it does boil down to the most rational choices in the moment. They make the best possible choices given the alternatives that they have. Our job as the American Capitalist Party is to give them the best alternative possible, something that they haven't seen before, something that will take the two sides in a debate forum and show the lunacy of both statist right and statist left, and that the real solution to that is liberty.
So, Mark, my girlfriend here in the chat says, who's that sexy guy on the left? I hope she's talking about on her left and not on my left on the screen, because we might have an issue.
Hey, you're on my left, so I'm assuming it's you.
But yeah, what we need is freedom, Mark. You're absolutely right. I got a little distracted. I'm not used to being called the sexy guy on the left or anywhere else, so I'm a little thrown back.
Now, does she mean sexy guy on the left as in the political left, or was she talking about directionally?
I don't think she means on the political left. Good. I don't think I have been called an obleftivist over and over again, so maybe there are some people who would mistake me for a leftist. I've also been called a commie sympathizer by some of the Trump supporters, in which I point out, why don't we go issue by issue and see who's to the right of whom?
That's funny.
On some of these subjects. You know what I mean?
I could never in a million years, knowing you, call you a commie sympathizer.
No, but it's funny because in the big house where it's predominantly leftist, I was frequently you're a right wing Republican. No, I'm really not, but I would be called a Republican over and over again. So I guess it's depending on one's interlocutors who you're going to be associated with. But neither am I am moderate. I am a radical for capitalism, 100%. That's why I am proudly the vice chairperson of the American Capitalist Party. And speaking of capitalism, Mark, unless you have something to add to this, perhaps you can give us our capitalist thought of the day, and we can do a little discussion on that, and then take the weekend off.
Wow, you always catch me.
I did it yesterday all on my own. I'll tell you what, I was here yesterday all by myself. It is so hard. And I love to run my mouth, but to run my mouth for the 37 minutes I did it, luckily, I got some, questions here in the chat that aided me in the endeavor. But that's tough. Without someone to talk to, just sitting here staring at myself, talking. Wow, tough job.
Who was it that spoke for 23 hours on the Senate floor the other day? Was it Cory Booker?
Cory Booker, yeah.
Yeah. So how did he do that? We have to tap that diary of the brain somehow and.
Well, I think that they're not actually saying productive things. They're just rambling on and on and on and on. I can do that, but I'm actually trying to make sense, use a message, make coherent arguments. I don't know if Cory Booker's capable of making a coherent argument, but that's what we're here for.
So I think the theme of the day that sort of has come out of the day is the necessity of freedom. That freedom means that we are going to be confronting ideas that we're not comfortable with. But that doesn't mean that those ideas should be banned. Freedom means we're going to be confronting people that we're not comfortable with, who hold ideas that are not only foreign to us, but abhorrent to us. But that doesn't mean that they should be sequestered and put away so that we no longer hear from them. That freedom demands a rational process for everyone. And that process is a process of persuasion. So when guys like Khalil are sequestered away without accusation, without due process, without subjecting, without enabling him to answer his accusers, without enabling proofs to come out and be discussed amongst rational people, we end up sliding into tyranny. So remember, freedom predominantly is for the preservation of rational virtues. Freedom enables the rational man to act in his own rational interests. That does mean that irrational people will do bad things too. Provided they don't hurt anybody else, they're allowed to do that stuff to themselves. But remember that the virtue, the greatness of freedom is that it enables virtuous action. So let's not forget that as hard as it may be to deal with people we don't agree with, freedom is the only thing that enables you to be a moral agent in your own life. And that is fundamental to life.
I think I heard Frankie approve.
Yeah, sort of. Hi, buddy.
What you just said, Mark, is so spot on. It reminds me of the purpose of due process. The reason that we have due process protections is ultimately to protect the innocent. But in the meantime, it also offers protections to the guilty. And we accept that fact in order to be free, in order to be a free and just people.
Yeah, so people say, why protect the guilty? I mean, you're protecting the innocent, but in that sweep, the guilty get protected as well. Well, I think Rand said it best, that rights subordinate might to right. They subordinate force to reason. We want a rational society, and a rational society subordinates violence. It bans violence and subordinates it to a rational process, so that on all levels, your right to think and act are protected. So let's not forget what we are all about is the mitigation of violence in society. We're about banning force in all interpersonal relationships, every single personal relationship. no force.
Awesome and well said. All right, take us out, Mark, and we'll be back Monday.
Yes, folks, thank you for listening to episode 5. Remember to follow Michael Liebowitz's show, The Rational Egoist. Remember to follow him on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter if you want a good ass kicking, or if you want love too. If you're a nice person, I give love. If you're a bad person, I punch you in the mouth. That's just the way I work, and that makes for a peaceful world, doesn't it? Anyway, but we're going to be back Monday. We're going to be discussing more current events, and we hope you tune in and tell your friends to tune in, because this message needs to go viral. Okay, it needs to go viral yesterday. Remember to always check your premises, and remember, freedom is awesome. Peace.